I'm Phil Moser, Philmoser. I am the St. Louis District Foods Wrap Program Manager.
I'm Robin, ROBIN Parks, PARKS, and I'm the St. Louis Foods Wrap Technical Lead.
What's the latest in terms of your cleanup efforts?
So our extensive cleanup efforts that we've been doing for the past 25 years encompass a lot of sampling, investigation, and remediation. So throughout the entire year, weather permitting, we have crews in the field 365 days a year doing some type of sampling or remediation. So right now, a lot of our efforts our technical efforts are focused on the Jana Elementary situation, making sure that we get our reports finalized in there, and also developing the design for that area so that we can expeditiously get in that area and remediate this summer.
And people are worried. We were just talking about it. People are so worried, and there's a lot of anxiety about this. This has been going on for so long. Why has this been a problem for so long?
So we definitely recognize the community's concerns, and we want to make sure that we let them know that we are in this process to see it through. We are the St. Louis District. We've been in this area for the 25 years, and it's an extensive project. North County in and of itself is over 2,000 acres. So just not the original rod boundary, but to include Coldwater Creek and the 10-year floodplain is a massive effort that we have undertaken with the Corps of Engineers. We're here to see that process through, and it does take some time. We understand that. We want to make sure that people are as well informed as possible throughout this process, so we're committed to making sure that happens.
At the same time, you've had decades to help solve this problem. Why is it still happening?
The entirety of the St. Louis North County sites being so massive, and the initial process that was undertaken by the Corps of Engineers is to make sure that these sources were remediated. The sources being St. Louis Airport site and the Hazelwood Interim Storage site. Those sources have been remediated. Those high-level contamination areas are gone. So now the extensive process that the entire team is going through involves that thorough investigation that takes a considerable amount of time up front, during, and afterwards to make sure that we have a thorough investigation process. So once again, yeah, that definitely takes time. And we want to make sure that the community is informed as well as possible throughout that process. Not just the community, but the coordination with those individual property owners so that they're fully aware throughout their right of entry process and then the investigation and the follow-on process when we get to the documentation.
Are people dealing with different levels of radioactivity depending on where they live?
So the levels of radioactivity that we're talking about are low-level contamination, as I talked about, compared to the actual source contamination sites at St. Louis Airport site and the Laddie Avenue properties. So the low-level contamination that we have been finding is predominantly low-level below the surface and is inside the creek in and of itself. So we want to make sure that people understand that, in those individual property owners and that coordination, we want to let them know throughout that process and let them know if there's that contamination there, the precautions that should be taking place before we get to that area and are able to remediate it.
Do people know? Is there enough awareness? Is there enough transparency? Many people say that there weren't any signs along the creek noting levels of radioactivity. Why weren't there any signage?
So our agency is not the appropriate agency for putting signs up on the creek. We are a federal agency, and all the property along the creek is owned by others. So that coordination definitely can happen at some point with a different agency, and we're willing to be a part of that process.
Do you think there's been enough transparency throughout the process?
We try to be as transparent as possible. We want to make sure that the community understands via our normal updates that we provide in our public outreach and our meetings that we provide, and also the individual coordination with property owners. The individual property owners along the creek in and of itself are the ones that are really affected by this communication. So we want to make sure that we bring them along in that part of that process, sharing with them along the results of our sampling and then the finalized reports that when we finalize that area.
Many people in the community, however, say that they feel that you have not been transparent. Why do you think they feel that way?
I think it's a natural reaction because the process does take quite a bit of time. We want to make sure we're thorough in our upfront planning, the sampling, investigation, and in the evaluation and documentation. That does take a considerable amount of time. We have completed documents that are out there, completed reports that are available for specific properties that are available for the public to view. I think that there's a lot of awareness that we can work on, that we can make sure that does happen. we're committed to that outreach and making sure that does happen. We have an extensive amount of information on our website that we want to make sure that people have available to them, as well as our meetings that we've been having, our virtual open houses because of the pandemic, and before that we have our open houses where we provide the opportunity for anyone in the community to come up and ask questions, not just to myself, but all the technical team members that we provide in the meetings to make sure if there's any question that is out there, that we are here to answer those.
Are people in North County exposed to higher levels of radioactivity compared to other places in the St. Louis area?
The levels of radioactivity that we have been finding, of course, as mentioned, are low level and below the surface, so people are not currently being exposed, but there is the potential, and that's why we're here, is there's the potential.
So do people in North County have a higher potential for being exposed to radioactivity compared to other areas of St. Louis?
People that live near the creek that do have contamination that is close to the creek bank have the higher potential.
Have those people been informed about that higher potential?
Yes.
Have they historically been informed about that higher potential?
Throughout this process, and when we come and we want to make sure that those individual property owners, that we coordinate with them. So yes, that's part of the overall process when we initially talk to those property owners and let them know what we're doing, and the Corps of Engineers here to do that sampling aspect of it. We want to make sure that they have those opportunities to ask questions and also help us to inform them.
It's so confusing for so many people, and this is a problem that's been passed along through decades, and so it's hard to point blame. But kind of taking a step back, is there anything you wish you had done differently?
When I think back, as I've been with the Corps for 6 years, and I would say that the time has been extremely rewarding for me, because this is a service that we're providing to the community. And the better we can get that message out, the better we can tell the community about the extensive amount of work that we have done and continue to do, and our commitment to this region. We want to make sure that people know that. So I think that that's our commitment moving forward. We want to make sure that our outreach is extensive, that we let people know that what's going on, how much work we have done, and our commitment to the community. So that's where we want to make sure moving forward that we have even more of that with this community.
How do you explain areas in North County? How do you explain why there are cancer clusters in North County?
That aspect of it is not part of our program. Our mission, which we are committed to, is finding, evaluating, and remediating the radioactive contamination that is there. We feel for the community, right? We understand the anxiety that's out there and the potential for any other the health effects that have been plagued this community for quite some time. We're here to solve that portion of the process that is associated with Manhattan Engineering District, Atomic Energy Commission waste. So we want to make sure that that is clear, that we are committed to that portion of that process, but we are not a health agency. That is not part of our mission. Our mission is to clean up the radioactive contamination that's associated with food scrap. I want to say that our extensive sampling that we did at Jana Elementary and the associated evaluation specifically show that the school, from a radiological standpoint, is safe.
What is considered safe?
So when it's considered safe, would you go through an entire evaluation that, in accordance with the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation Liability Act, to make sure that you can make that statement. And that's the thorough process that we go through to do that. So the simple statement of radiological standpoint, the school is safe, involves an entire investigative and extensive process to evaluate that.
Would you send your children to Jana Elementary?
Yes, I would.
For people who have been there for decades, is long-term exposure worrisome?
The long-term exposure is why we are here, because there is the potential for long-term exposure. As I've stated earlier, because of the nature and extent of our contamination being low level and below ground surface, no one is currently being exposed, but there is the potential there for them, and that's why we're here to clean that up.
And the other thing that I've read was about the conditions are safe in the current configuration, right? And that means in the current setup, the way the soil is currently set up, it's safe. What if the soil moves? What if weather destroys and disturbs the soil? is the kind of thinking around current configuration just not realistic?
So I understand the concern about using the term safe in its current configuration. It's a hard thing for us to convey to the public about what's safe, what does current configuration mean? And the question is, if something's below the surface, what if it becomes surface somehow? And we've tried to do extensive studies. We just had a big flood this last summer, and we went out and did a very extensive study on sediments that were moved by Coldwater Creek and left behind. And out of that extensive study, we did not find any contamination in any of our results that indicated any migration of contaminated soil. It's worth mentioning that we prioritize our remediations based on the risk of human contact. So if we would find something that presents a risk of human contact that's higher than normal, an immediate risk, that is prioritized for the program, and that's an area that we would go to and remediate. And again, it's just our commitment to the community. Examples of reprioritization are Duchesne Park, St. Cyr Park, Palm Drive properties. We found contamination there that we thought was at a higher risk of human contact, and so we shifted all the priorities for the program and went and did those properties.
When it comes to cleanup in the area, is there environmental racism going on?
Our mission is committed to this community, and we take into account, as Robin has talked about, where the potential for exposure is, where the potential for human contact is. So that's what really drives our mission, and we want to make sure that that is clear in this community and our commitment to the community. So our decisions are specifically driven by where the highest possibility for human contact is.
So people in North County get the same level of attention as people in West County?
Our mission is right here in North County. So we are committed to that here in North County, and we're not swaying from that. We're not going anywhere else. We have a dedicated team here. Many of the personnel on the FOOSREP team are specifically dedicated to FOOSREP. They have been for many years and will continue to be until the mission is complete.
Is there anything else that you'd like to say that I haven't asked? That we talked about messaging, and I know that's an important thing that you want to get across. If you could go back, would you have done that differently? If you could go back, would you have redone the way you message?
I would say that we want to continue to relay the message to the community about how dedicated we are. We have been here for 25 years, yes, we've had that mission, and we will continue that mission until it is complete, to make this community whole again, to really give that sense, to remove the contamination that's associated with FOOSREP and get this community back into the better situation where it should be.
People in the area have complained. People in the area say that they've been begging for answers, and they've been giving tips, and they've been trying to get answers, and they're stonewalled. What's your response to them?
We want to make sure that people understand that they can ask us questions. We have dedicated email address. We also are able to take phone calls as well. So if anybody does have questions, make sure that they bring those to us. We also want to make sure people are aware of the massive amount of information that we do have already out there. Frequently asked questions, fact sheets, all of our documentation associated with our project, also on our website. We want to make sure people understand that there's a lot of information that can be consumed out there, in addition to asking us specific questions if they want to make sure that they understand the process.
And just again, in terms of the timeline, why are we still talking about this? This is a problem that started in the 1940s. Why has this taken so long to clean up?
Let me answer a little bit. That question's related to what you asked previously about, number one, our messaging, but also would we change anything? And it's really important to note, Phil mentioned that we've first focused on the source areas, the areas that had the highest volumes of contamination, but also the highest levels. We've removed over 1 million cubic yards of contaminated soil from North County so far. That's a lot. And I think oftentimes our messaging talks about right now and what's to come in the future, but we don't focus enough on what we've accomplished. And that's a major accomplishment. And also, you asked about would we do anything different? I've been here for 26, 7 years, something like that, for just in Future App. And I wouldn't say that I would change anything, but what I would tell you is that we've learned a lot through the years. And related to Coldwater Creek, we've really only been focused on that and known about the contamination related to Coldwater Creek since 2012. We've learned a lot about Coldwater Creek. We've changed the way that we investigate Coldwater Creek as we have learned. So while I wouldn't look back and say I would change something, I would say that myself and everyone else in this project, our commitment to this program in the community is like, let's learn as we go and let's adapt and let's figure it out. And right now, I can say with 100% confidence that the way that we approach our investigations, like, we've learned a ton since 2012 and have changed a lot.
Why was 2012 the defining marker for you?
So 2012 is just the year that I know we figured out we need to start focus on Coldwater Creek. We were finishing with the source areas, and through time we learned that the sources contributed contamination to Coldwater Creek through surface runoff. And when we started to realize that through sampling, that's when we started to focus on Coldwater Creek. It wasn't anything special about the year, it was just the progression of our program.
So before then, you didn't know that Coldwater Creek was so dangerous?
No, that's not what I mean to say at all. We knew that there was the potential for contamination in Coldwater Creek. The remedial investigation sampled the entire creek bed within the creek bottom itself from here to the Missouri River, and there were some spotty areas of contamination. What we started to learn, though, was that contamination was actually within the banks and had been redeposited on top of the banks through flooding mechanism, and that wasn't initially realized with the remedial investigation.
Would you say that you were wrong about certain things?
Oh, of course. We're wrong about contamination being limited to the sediments in the creek bed. We were also, I wouldn't say we were wrong, we were just not aware that flooding mechanism was going to redistribute the contamination from the creek to the adjacent areas. I would add a little bit of information. You said the creek was so dangerous. The residual contamination that is associated with Coldwater Creek is much, much lower level contamination as compared to the source areas that's been cleaned up already.
Given the fact that you've been wrong before, do you understand people's concerns that they're skeptical?
Of course. Phil's talked about this a little bit. We empathize with any citizen that is worried about this, and we understand that there's a lot of information may not come directly from us, and they're trying to wade through all that information, figure out what's right, what's wrong, what to believe, what not to believe, and we're completely committed as a program to make sure that our messaging to anyone in this community is what we believe in and what the truth is, and is strictly focused on our remediation efforts in North County.
You've said that Jana was safe. Are you looking at other schools in the Hazelwood School District?
So the Hazelwood School District does own a couple other parcels. So one associated with the Family Outreach Center and that parcel, and then there's also a couple parcels that are close to the Airpoint Elementary that is part of our investigation as well. And the results that we've had at the Family Outreach Center show all of the samples are below remediation goals, and we don't have all the data back from the area around the parcels close to the Airpoint Elementary, but the early indication is the data that we have seen back from those are below remediation goals as well.
What about other areas in North County?
There's an extensive amount of sampling that we've done in North County associated with the Coldwater Creek and the 10-year floodplain, and the areas that we have been finding are spotty areas of that low-level contamination that we plan to conduct the remediation as we've been going through up and down the creek and following Jana Elementary this summer.
What's next for the Jana Elementary case?
So for Jana Elementary, we want to make sure that people understand that we're committed to that. We've spent a lot of time and resources, reasonably so, to make sure that the Hazelwood School District and the community has the most information that they can moving forward to make the best decisions. So right now we have an entire team that's focused on finalizing the documentation associated with the structure surveys that we did, the soil samples, and also working on the remedial design for that area. So the next portion of that process is finalizing that remedial design and getting in there and removing that contamination that's on the creek bank in this summer.
And now we're learning there's contamination on the football field, is that right?
The football field, that's an area that we had no notice of as far as the sampling that had been contracted by the Hazelwood School District. So we're maintaining awareness of that situation, but we have no knowledge, no specific knowledge of that.
When you say maintaining awareness, what do you mean?
Just as, well, we're following the story, we're following the information as best we can without having specific contact with anyone about it, and making sure that if there is any specific evidence to that we can make our decisions moving forward.
And just how do you explain the different results from different companies testing the same thing?
So I can't speak to the specifics of any of the other companies that are doing that. I will say that our investigation, our results, and our process is in accordance with all the laws and regulation that we have to follow, in accordance with our program, that is in accordance with the Multi-Agency Radiation Survey and Site Investigation Manual and the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation Liability Act. The results are not that much different. It's the conclusions that are in accordance with those federal regulations that may differ.
So you asked a question about other school properties in Hazelwood District. Phil explained that we've investigated a couple other properties and the results are below remedial goals. So just in addition to what Phil said, I would just give you an explanation of what above or below remedial goals means. When we say something is below remedial goals, that means the results indicate that it's protective of human health and the environment.
Is the goal is that the threshold we read earlier about like 1 in 10,000 versus 1 in 100,000 cases or something like that?
It does have the remedial goals are centered around additional risk to humans. It is a threshold that says remediate or don't remediate. It's extremely conservative, and so we're really confident when we say something is below remedial goals that it is protective of human health and the environment.
Do those goals switch based on sites?
No. Well, not within North County.
Okay. What about outside of North County? Do the goals differ outside of North County?
So as an example, we have a site downtown, the SLID site, St. Louis downtown site. It's a completely industrial area. It's not zone residential at all. So those remedial goals are reflective of the industrial worker scenario, not a residential scenario.